Hey guys, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to another great week. We are going to go ahead and leave behind digestion and we're going to learn a little bit about the blood system. So, in this category of learning about humanity, I don't know why I'm talking like this. This category of learning about humanity is going to be focused on how we take all of the stuff that we get from digestion, so all those lovely nutrients, and how we're going to go ahead and incorporate them into our bodies using our very powerful and awesome network of transportation known as our circulatory system. Which is, of course, where all of our blood goes through, all your pipes leading all that little red stuff everywhere. So let's go ahead and get started. The blood system, or the blood system. Whoa, if you want to take a vampire note. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Aha. So we're going to be covering today the cardiovascular system, the components of blood vessels, and we're going to leave heart structure, cardiac cycle, mechanism of heartbeat, and coronary heart disease, or however you want to pronounce that, CHD, until later. The cardiovascular system is going to be your blood system. It's responsible for carrying around all the important stuff you got floating around in there, like lipids, carbohydrates, all that good stuff to transport that through your bloodstream um, and get it to where it needs to go. So it's going to carry all that good stuff, oxygen and nutrients and water, and it's going to get rid of all the bad stuff and transport all that bad stuff to things like your kidney, which is going to, filter out your blood and make sure that you don't have any of that stuff floating around in you. It also is going to help you maintain a constant body temperature by constantly making sure that heat from your core is distributed out to your limbs so your legs don't fall off. And it transports hormones, which we all like. Yay, hormones! Woo! Makes life easier, right? Anyway, so these are the three components of the cardiovascular system. We got blood, which is going to be the just the fluid that carries everything. We have vessels, which are going to be the pipes, basically your plumbing. Oh, I didn't even read that it said pipes, but it says pipes. Haha, we're thinking on the same vein, pun intended. And then we have the heart, which is going to be the pump that pumps all that blood through your vessels. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a closer look. So our modern system was first proposed by a guy named William Harvey, who dressed like a Shakespearean dork with a pointy beard. He came up with this system that was we have these major vessels, arteries, which carry blood to your heart. Arteries, which carry blood away from your heart to your body, and veins, which carry blood to your heart that has been, deoxygenated and needs to be replenished. And his idea was that it was all part of a single network rather than having a bunch of different networks that are all together. So the heart functions as this central pumping system, arteries from the heart, veins to the heart, like I said, and it's a continuous flow that is unidirectional. In other words, your blood does not travel from your heart out to, your toe and then back to your heart and then all that stuff like along the same lines. It's a loopy system like a clover leaf on the highway that makes sure that traffic is not disruptive and most importantly that you're not mixing blood with waste in it with clean blood that's been freshly reoxygenated and ready to go from the heart. So we can see from the heart, our arteries are going to pump that nice oxygenated, purified blood out here to the body's organs. It's also going to pump it over to the lungs, which is very important. And then the blood that is used by those body organs and lungs, all the oxygen is taken out of it, all the nutrients in the blood that doesn't have oxygen in it, and a lot of waste goes back through the system. It's filtered by the kidney and stuff like that. It's brought back to the heart through these veins, and then it's pumped back out again, reoxygenated, and all that stuff. So the heart, we're not going to go into too much today, but just know that it's a four-chambered hollow muscle. The top chambers that are called atria are reservoirs, so they hold most of the blood that comes into the heart, and the ventricles are the pumps. The left side is what we call systemic circulation, which basically just means oxygenated blood goes to your lungs and your body. So that's the blood that is recharged and ready to go. Pulmonary circulation is on the right-hand side, and that's going to take that deoxygenated blood from the body and lungs. So this is going to be really important when you need to rejuvenate that blood. Let's talk about blood. Let's talk about blood, yes. Blood is what we carry stuff in. Blood is composed of many things. It's not just red dye and water. If you thought that, that would be kind of hilarious and weird. My question would be, who put all that red dye in that water? No, but so most of your blood is actually made out of liquid plasma. Essentially, liquid plasma is a fairly pH neutral substance that carries around white blood cells and platelets. White blood cells are going to be like those lymphocyte attackers. We learned about them already. You know, they're going to be the things that go around and help to bolster your immune system. So they're on the patrol for bad stuff. They're like the cops. And then the platelets are going to be like the road crews that are traveling around, and you know, if there's any breakages or leakages in the veins or the blood vessels, they're going to be like, oh, we need to, you know, fix that. So if you think about this as like a major superhighway, you got the white blood cells and the platelets, which are like the road crew and the cops, and they're all, you know, driving around on the road. And most of the road, in the case of your blood, is made out of them. And then you're going to have red blood cells, which are going to be like, I guess you could say like the 18-wheelers. They're going to be the ones to transport all the oxygen. I guess you could think of as normal drivers on the road too, but they're everybody else who's transporting oxygen or other important necessary things down the road. Just like you transport important necessary things down the road, like yourself, and you know those cans of soda or whatever that you, I don't know. I'm just going to stop. Just keep going. So anyway, plasma is going to contain these three types of blood cells: red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So red blood cells are going to be the things that carry oxygen, white blood cells to fight infection, like I said, and platelets are involved in clotting or making sure that any holes in your highway are patched up and repaired. So there's a lot of stuff that's transported by the plasma, as you might imagine. I mean, we got nutrients, which normally are, you know, in the form of our energy-containing macromolecules. We have antibodies, which are going to be, you know, we've already kind of learned about those, but they're going to be traveling around and looking for antigens to bite onto, those pathogens. We're going to have carbon dioxide, which is going to be waste from our mitochondria, which are pooping or pooting it out because that's what they do. They take in oxygen and they put out carbon dioxide. It goes into your blood. We got hormones, which we all know about, and make your life so much fun. We have oxygen, which is going to be obviously important for your mitochondria. That's what they breathe in. Urea, which we've learned about. That's all that waste inside of your blood. Usually nitrogenous waste from the breakdown of proteins. And then we have heat, which is really important for keeping you alive since you are an endothermic organism. Your body temperature is controlled and not like the outside environment, which is important because if it was 32 degrees outside, you would not want to freeze. Let's talk about vessels. So vessels are basically the tubes that carry all the blood. We have arteries, which are going to have thick and very elastic walls. They're going to transport blood from the heart at high pressure. So in other words, when your heart is ready to go and has all that oxygenated filtered blood and all that stuff, it pumps it out through arteries. Now they have got to have really thick and elastic walls because the amount of pressure that they're under is incredible. Capillaries, hang on, think of arteries as being like, they're like the superhighways, okay? They're like the ones that, let's say, they lead out of cities. So like imagine like a giant superhighway leading out from Atlanta or New York or something, and it leads out into the rest of the country. So it's like taking all the people from New York and all that stuff and leading them out into the country, all the supplies and resources. Capillaries are going to be like the little back roads, the teeny little roads that you kind of turn off the highway. You exit off the highway and you go into capillaries, and that's where you actually like go into neighborhoods and towns and where people live and where you might live, right? And so capillaries are going to be the local exchange between blood and tissue. Let's say we loaded up a bunch of trucks with supplies, you know, like food and water and all that stuff in New York City. The arteries would be the highway that takes those trucks out of the city and drives them across the country. Eventually, when they're close to their destination, they're going to take exits onto smaller and smaller roads to get to the place they're dropping off the nutrients or, the supplies at. So those are going to be the capillaries that they're driving down. They have a single endothelial layer, so they're very low pressure and very small. Once we get down to the capillaries and we let go of all the nutrients and everything that we need, of course, we need to drive those trucks back to the city to load them up again. In order to do that, we're going to take veins back. So veins are basically like the same thing as arteries, but traveling in a different direction. However, there is a pretty substantial difference in their walls. Because they're at low pressure, they have very thin walls. They don't require that super thick walled structure. So if you just imagine like all the roads leading out of New York City, I mean, of course, this is backwards from probably what it actually is, but if you could imagine all the roads leading out would be super crowded and high pressure, and then the roads leading back in would be super low density. So maybe maybe that analogy doesn't stretch that far, but hopefully that makes sense. So anyway, the vascular system is a closed network, and that's really important because if we didn't have a closed network, we wouldn't be able to keep up that pressure. And pressure is vital because think about it, that one beat of your heart has got to send that blood traveling throughout your entire body. Okay, so that beat of that heart's got to be pretty darn powerful, and you can't have any breaks or leakages, substantial ones anyway, because your blood's going to be squirting out and it's not going to be able to reach the rest of your extremities. Like in the movies, when someone gets stabbed in the jugular and they're like, oh, and all the blood is like and like bleeding out and it's squirting all over the place, right? That's a problem, not only because it's disgusting and gross and also sad if it's a character that you like, but also, in doing that, they're, suddenly decreasing the pressure in their circulatory system. They're probably not getting the blood they need to all their extremities. Of course, at that point, it's probably not what they're worried about. But anyway, so arteries branch into smaller diameter arterioles, which diverge in the capillaries, and veins are formed when converging venules pool the blood from capillaries into those larger places. So imagine when you're on the superhighway of an artery, you're going to turn off onto a smaller highway called an arteriole before you turn off into the small back roads called capillaries. And then if your blood that's already dropped off everything and you're the truck ready to drive back to the city, you go ahead and converge with the other trucks along those same backcountry roads going the other way. Those are called venules now. And then you go ahead and you join onto the veins, which are the highway that takes you back to the city. So arteries, as we said, are really high pressure. If you look at them, they're composed of a really super structural integrity molecule called collagen. And the inner layer is composed of muscle and elastin. So we can see, those muscle fibers that we're used to seeing, those sarcomeres are going to be in there. And elastin is just going to help them to be better able to bend under pressure rather than snap. Because the blood is such high pressure, arteries do not contain valves. We do not want any backflow from arteries. It is all one direction. We can't have backflow because if we did, our system would explode. So it just goes all out in one direction, and we have to make sure that our arteries, can handle that pressure. So when arterial blood is transported, it's going to do so through almost called rhythmic surges called pulses. So this is kind of not really, but it's kind of like peristalsis. So when the first beat happens, of course, there's going to be a huge influx of blood from the heart into the artery. When that happens, those elastin walls are going to stretch, and we see that on the left, that pulse flow. We see a sudden influx of blood, they stretch. And then the natural elastic, how like when you pull on a rubber band or something and you let go of it, it kind of like it snaps back, but it kind of does that little jiggle thing before it stops. Or like if you're a musician and you pluck a string and you watch it, it's like vibrate, 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 and then it slowly kind of slows down. But you know what I'm talking about. Like that's kind of what's happening here. So we have this initial like huge pulse, and that's going to cause that wall of elastin to almost make a wave, and that's what we call that elastic recoil, and it's going to help to make sure that the blood is traveling in one direction, and that the pressure is maintained, and also that the blood vessel doesn't burst. So it's helping with that unidirectional wave. It's like, okay, we're moving away from the heart, we're not moving back. Okay, the capillaries, once we get into the small little back roads, they're going to be the ones that are actually used to exchange materials directly with organs and tissues and stuff. So they have a very small diameter and transport blood at a very low pressure. They have a basement membrane a lot like the glomerulus or the Bowman's capsule in the liver, or excuse me, kidney. This helps them to be able to be selective about what materials that they're letting into the tissues and what materials they're collecting from the tissues. So they have a semi-permeable membrane. We can see here that if you look at the bottom, sinusoidal is obviously just showing that there's like gaps between those walls. So sinusoidal would be, I guess, when we're transporting larger molecules in and out of the capillaries. Fenestrated is really porous, and continuous is going to be it's less permeable, more rigid structure. All of these are going to have different functions depending on whether or not they're near to tissues that need to receive large or a lot of molecules, or just places where the capillaries need to travel through the tissue before they can actually reach the destination where they need to be fenestrated or sinusoidal. Blood exchange. So blood exchange is really interesting. It happens through something called counter current exchange. So when blood flows through capillaries, it does so very slowly. Just like if you were a delivery truck, you'd want to slow down or stop before you made your delivery. If you were traveling at 60 miles an hour, your delivery would be very hard to make in the right place, and you might accidentally hit somebody and kill somebody along the way. It's like, here's your package, whoop! You know. So we don't want that. So when this happens, it happens very slowly. When materials exit the blood, like nutrients and oxygen, they do so because of a concentration gradient. So sometimes things are pumped actively, but most of the time in your body, you know, it's just really energy efficient to use a concentration gradient. So typically what happens is that the capillaries have a higher concentration of nutrients or oxygen than the organs that they're delivering to. And so it just passively, these things are able to passively diffuse through the membrane, or they're able to passively be transported like through facilitated diffusion and stuff like that. Um, so that's important because, you know, if you think about it like in an analogy, let's say you're a truck delivering necessary food and stuff to a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of food, you know, like a Meals on Wheels kind of thing. That makes a lot more sense, and it makes more sense and it's more efficient for the truck to do that in that sort of community than for a community that has a surplus of food and doesn't really need it. Right? So like the communities that are in need of this stuff receive it more than the communities that aren't. And that's the same in your, you know, your body's tissues and organs. If they need it, they're probably more likely to get it because of that concentration gradient. It's just going to flow naturally in. So we can see filtration and reabsorption, net filtration. We have 10 millimeters. Actually, I'm a little confused about those units. Net filtration of -7. I'm not really sure what the slide is trying to show us, but I do want to show you here. I'm going to show you counter current exchange so that this makes sense to you. Counter current exchange. And this will be a better graph. I think this is what that thing is trying to show, but it's not doing it very well. Or I'm just an idiot, which is also maybe true. Okay, so countercurrent flow. So if we look, if we have co-current flow, it means that things are flowing in the same direction and they have basically the same concentration, or they will. So like if you had, let's say that you had, this is the capillaries that are coming off of the arteries. So this is all the good blood. And these are the capillaries leading, you know, back to the veins and back to the heart. Okay, if they flowed in the same direction and we had like 100% oxygen and nutrients in the good blood, it would naturally want to diffuse, right? Because if they were side by side, we would have this 100% of oxygen and nutrients, and we'd have 0% over here, so it would all want to go down here. But as they were flowing together, eventually, you know, what would happen is they would get to 50-50, and then there would be no more net exchange of materials. So that's super inefficient. At this point, they wouldn't be passing any materials from here to here or oxygen or nutrients or anything. So it completely shut down that process of transfer. Over here, though, if we have countercurrent flow, if we end up with, you know, a similar but less concentrated amount here and more concentrated amount here, and we keep that going all the way through, then we can have a full transfer of stuff from one system to the other. Let me see if I can find, here's some heat exchange as an example. So we're not going to worry about the concurrent flow because you can see how that would just even out. But say, let's say that you have, let's say what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you're conserving heat in the core of your body. So let's say you're in a situation where it's just really cold outside and you're in danger of hypothermia. Your body's going to want to conserve most of the heat around your vital organs in your core, like your heart and your lungs and all that stuff. So to prevent all that stuff from freezing, let's say that this is really close to your heart. It's 33 degrees Celsius, let's say, very close to your heart. And let's say, as it moves out towards your limbs, like your arms and everything, you get colder and colder because those things are farther away from your core. Okay, so let's say that this is an artery leaving your heart and going to your extremities, and these are the veins coming from your extremities to go back to your heart. Well, notice what's going to happen. The veins that are coming into your back from your extremities are cold because your extremities are cold. So that blood is very cold. It's lost all of its heat. And so it has less temperature than the arteries that are flowing beside it, but in the opposite direction, that are going out to your extremities. So what's going to happen is that concentration gradient is naturally going to build up, and all that heat is going to go from your arteries into your veins. So the blood that's coming back from your extremities isn't going to be cold. It will eventually be near to the same temperature. It'll only have lost 1 degree when it gets back to your heart. This is really important because if you didn't warm that blood back up, if there was no countercurrent exchange of that heat, then when it came back to your heart, it would cool down your core. So you would constantly be losing heat from your core and you'd eventually die because of the blood coming in from your cold extremities. So this helps you to keep all of the heat near your extremities. So you can imagine something like this, but just with nutrients happening with the thing that we were talking about. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. So when we're coming back using your veins are going to carry your blood back to your heart at a very low pressure. They have a wide lumen, which is just referring to this interior space because they're under such low pressure, and they're taking in quite a lot of volume from stuff in your tissues. The blood pressure is not going to flow in pulses. It's not going to be low. In fact, it's going to be very low right before it reaches your heart because your heart is, going to repressurize the system. So it's kind of, you can imagine it's a long way away from the pump. The veins are going to possess valves. So because it's at such low pressure, there is actually a danger at a certain point of your blood flowing backwards. And that's not good because that's going to deliver deoxygenated and waste-heavy blood back to your body's tissues and organs. And that's not what you want. So the veins actually have these valves that will close as they go, and the valve will make it so that that can't send blood back to pool in any place in your body, which sounds disgusting, and it is. It can happen. This is why very low blood pressure is very dangerous. So valves are going to ensure that unidirectional flow, and they're one-way valves. So they exist in your veins and in your heart, and they're going to be compressed actually by your skeletal muscles. So it's interesting that, I don't know if you've experienced like sitting down for a long time, in the classroom. You know how you can start to feel like, oh my God, just like really sleepy and tired, and you're just like, oh, like sluggish. That sluggish, sleepy, tired feeling goes away, or it goes away faster when you stand up and you start moving around the classroom, right? So maybe there's an activity or something, you start to feel a little bit more awake. Why is that? Well, it turns out that because your blood vessels are traveling alongside of your skeletal muscles, the antagonistic muscle pairs we talked about, those skeletal muscles will actually sort of rub up against your veins and arteries, and they will almost like kind of massage the blood through your system. So when you move, your skeletal muscles are actually promoting a more faster and more intense blood flow, which is good, right? Because you need a faster and more intense blood flow when you're moving around. So, excuse me, wow. So these vessels can help be closed or opened based off of your skeletal muscles. And the veins will often run parallel to the arteries so that they can be further compressed by those ulterior, like the bulge in the artery walls when they pulse. There's a couple of different external ways in which the valves are allowed to be kept closed or remained open. Obviously, it kind of happens, the whole thing happens as a pulse. So when you're moving your skeletal muscles, when you contract you can help to contract the valves, and the valves will open, and then when you release, the valves close. So that just prevents your blood from traveling backwards and pooling in your muscles. So vessel contraction, this is all the traits and stuff that you need to know about in terms of vessels and blood. That's all we're going to cover today. So that's all the info. You'll have a little bit of exploration and questions and stuff. That's all I really want you guys to take a look at and look into. I hope you've enjoyed this topic. It is a really fascinating topic. It is relatively short, but I think it's really cool to give us an appreciation of how those skeletal muscles we've already talked about, concentration gradients, stuff like the glomerulus and all that sort of thing, sort of plays into the larger context of your circulatory system. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I can't wait to give you another lesson on Wednesday. All right, guys. Take care. Stay happy, healthy, and safe.